Hello, my name is Antonio Pappano, and I'm the music director of the Royal Opera House Covent Garden in London and the Santa Cecilia Orchestra and Chorus in Rome. This platform is IDAGIO, as you know, and I want to thank them for letting me speak to you today about Verdi's Aida, and specifically our recording from 2015, made in Rome with an absolutely stellar cast, including Jonas Kaufmann, Anja Harteros, and Miss Semenchuk, Mr. Tezier, Mr. Schrott, myself conducting, and the orchestra and chorus of Santa Cecilia, and a police band playing the banda parts. The opera Aida is something very, very special because it marked for Verdi the end of his career. Slowly he had become the most successful, the richest, the most famous of all operatic composers. And this was to be his swan song, shall we say. He was commissioned by the Royal Opera House in Cairo, the Khedivial Opera House, and to write an opera on an Egyptian subject. He got a fabulous amount of money, 150,000 French francs, and the sets were to be the greatest, most lavish, all coming from Paris. Unfortunately, the premiere had to be delayed because of the Franco-Prussian War, and the sets were stuck in Paris, and they didn't arrive. Finally, they did, and in December 1871, the piece was performed in Cairo. And Verdi was not present during this time. A couple of months later, this piece was to come to La Scala. And there he was very, very much involved in its premiere. He had his favorite soprano, Teresa Stolz, and Franco Faccio conducted the premiere in Italy. And this was, for him, the real premiere, introducing the piece. Now, whenever you talk about Verdi operas, you have to use a word called tinta. And tinta is a word, yes, in English, tint, but it has to do with color and atmosphere. Usually what the somehow sensations are when you hear the first notes of the piece, the defining fabric that is the piece. And of course, he was writing a piece set in the old kingdom of Egypt, not specifying the period really, but just something very, very far away from us, culturally and in time. And this, I think, inspired him to create a new musical language. He had written 3 operas that were very important just before, Un ballo in maschera, La forza del destino, and Don Carlos. But importantly, he was also finding the time, something exotic. And you hear this in the first notes, the violin. Second voice joins. Now, using the high register and this yearning theme, which is really the Aida theme, or Radames' love for Aida. And this, when you hear it in the opera house or on this recording, again, I think of mood, think of atmosphere, think of place, because it is conveyed very, very beautifully. There's an almost, how shall I say, hermetically sealed atmosphere. I was very excited about making this recording in Rome because of the hall that we have in Rome, the Parco della Musica, which is a very, very large space. And although there are many moments of intimacy in this opera, and it's fabled for these moments of intimacy, it's intimacy in a large space. There must be air to breathe. And of course, the most famous parts of this opera are its many grand scenes, chorus, orchestra, extra musicians, even trumpets invented for this opera, the Aida trumpets playing the triumphal march. But with this opera, we start to hear Verdi become very, very sophisticated indeed with his harmonies. So he has become a real master by this point in his career. The opera, after this very lonely prelude, let me tell you, he did have in mind another opening to this opera, a prelude full of themes, a potpourri, if you like. Yes, full of vitality, but that he later called insipid and pretentious. The orchestra, the Santa Cecilia Orchestra, has brought this prelude on tour, and it is extremely effective, let me tell you. But this is better for the opera, this mood setting. The opera opens with a little discourse between Memphis, the high priest, and Radames, the military commander, and we hear that the Ethiopians are attacking. What we need to know is that Aida, the Ethiopian princess, the daughter of Amonasro, has been captured by the Egyptians. They don't know she's the princess, but she's fallen in love with Radames. And the opera is about the struggle that Aida faces, the struggle to reconcile these two impossible things, the love for her country and for her family, and the love for Radames, and for Radames, who has the duty to his country and yet his love for Aida. So it's a very, very, very strong hook for the story. Now, a leader is to be chosen to lead the fight against the inevitable fight against the Ethiopians, and later we'll find out that that will be Radames. But in his opening aria, after this little discourse, perhaps one of the most famous arias in all opera, Radames says, "If only I could be that leader. If only my dream would be realized." And we hear this very military music. Famous fanfare. What's interesting is we hear it in many different keys. Then this B flat to D, something, third related chords that Mahler would go on to use extensively. Then plagal, and then again I speak of harmonic ingenuity, and then he speaks of Aida. Mia dolce Aida, tornarti lauricinto, and to come back to you, my Aida. Did you hear that? This chord we ended on, which becomes this chord. creating that romantic mood. Very clever in one chord. This is the ability now of Verdi to quickly bring us into new spaces with our ears and of course with our souls. This goes on to introduce Celestial Aida. He speaks of Aida in ravishing terms. The accompaniment is very interesting because it's very simple. Just the pizzicato in the cello and a flute and shimmering violins. Simple but telling harmonies. It couldn't be more chamber music than this. And this is one of the novelties in this opera. He dares to go small. What does this do? Well, this creates such a contrast with the big scenes that are to come. And I think this is a stroke of genius. He has incredible courage because, let's face it, loud, exciting, brash, Italian, full-blooded declamation, whether it be in the singing parts or in the orchestra parts, is much more exciting, is much more theatrical. This makes you listen with a different ear. He does have, of course, interesting climaxes. He wants to, put a pedestal up there for Aida, next to the sun, a throne, un trono vicino al sol. This aria finishes with an incredibly difficult vocal. Un trono vicino al sol, un trono vicino al sol. He goes up to the high B flat and it says pianissimo already, very, very softly, and morendo, dying away. This has become one of the great challenges for the tenors, and very, very, very few people can achieve this. It requires a facility of the throat that very few singers actually have. I'm happy to report, and it's one of the glories of this recording, is the way that Jonas does the finale to this aria. It's just spectacular, just as it is written, and again creating a new kind of musicality, something that I would not call necessarily Italianate, but it has a refinement. Yes, that has to do with chamber music more than anything else. As we move forward, we meet Amneris. Now, Amneris is the daughter of the king, and she happens to be in love with Radames too. Now, we meet her with this theme. It's a very rich theme played on the G string with the violins. And you hear its regal quality. There's something, though, cold about it, as if she's wearing the greatest riches on earth, and yet she keeps you at a distance. You see her observing Radames, and that's something, he's thinking something. Of course, he's thinking about his love for Aida. Now, Amneris is very, very sensitive and senses that something is amiss, but she can't quite put her finger on it exactly. Her vocal lines they go go from the middle register to the low register. We want to hear that deep, dramatic mezzo-soprano voice. She has a phrase like this. Amazing confidence she has in her vocal delivery. But she's also, I mentioned, she's suspicious. It's a remarkable phrase of Verdi, changing the harmony. Listen again. He had said to her previously, I'm thinking of a dream I've had, meaning wanting to be the leader, the military leader. But she says, but aren't you thinking something else? Something more gentle, more sweet. And listen to the harmony there. Here in particular. Gorgeous. Don't you have desires here in Memphis? Hopes? She's talking about herself. She's talking about marriage. Non hai tu in whisper. Speranza. Io qual inchiesta. He says, what a question. He turns away. And we hear a theme that plays a big part in that overture, that overblown overture I told you about. It's the jealousy theme. It almost sounds like a Beethoven sonata. It has this in the bass. So it's extremely active. All of a sudden, remember the theme from the prelude? Yes, Aida walks in. She has been enslaved and she's the servant of Amneris. He says, this, it's her. Amneris notices that he is somehow disturbed. She doesn't know how. This is that chord where she says, the way he looks at her. And then we go back to that jealous music. Of course, you can imagine this triangle. It's fascinating to watch as theater. And Aida, she's all discombobulated. She's thinking, she says, oh, the war. I hear a terrible scream of war. This is followed on by a remarkable trio that is not the easiest listening because it's almost an experiment on Verdi's part. It's really a duet with a solo. The solo being Aida singing, ah no, sulla mia patria non geme il cor soltanto. Quello, I'm not only in pain for my country, but for my love for Radames. Okay, and the other two, Radames and Amneris, are bickering. So, and the orchestra is extremely unstable here, and very, very jittery and agitated. I talked to you about the bigger moments, and after that scene, and the basses and the timpani is just absolutely fantastic. We have the king announcing that there's going to be a war, a messenger that comes and specifically tells us what's going on. We have to choose a leader. That leader will, of course, be Radames. Radames! Ah, thank the gods. must go to Vulcan's temple and pray for victory. And here you're introduced to one of the many marches that make a part of this opera. Now, we started out in the prelude with these very, very high-lying instruments, but after having written Don Carlo and La Forza del Destino and operas like this, Verdi's feeling for the bass instruments and this. But you start to hear really the orchestra, the depth of in particular the string sound now is much more confident, richer, somehow more affecting and effective. This march then becomes everybody with soloists and chorus, male chorus, really in a very military mode with the orchestra. This kind of thing. It ends up with everybody screaming, "Ritorna vincitor," return the conqueror. Aida is left alone. She even says these words, return the conqueror, but the conqueror against her own family, against her own people. This is absolutely shocking. The phrase that everybody sang was, "Ritorna vincitor," and then we have the play out of the march. And she now sings those almost the same notes, but listen how going to the minor, not, but those words came from my mouth. And this recitativo, or almost spoken now delivery, declaimed. I'm saying that I'm hoping that he will be the victor over my father, my people, yes, over my brothers. Verdi does an amazing vision of death and destruction and war. And she talks about this, please, gods, let me forget these crazy words. The music is very, very modern here. You get this syncopation. In her unsteadiness, we hear her psychological unsteadiness in the orchestra. It's brilliantly, brilliantly done. She ends this very high note. Wretch, what are you saying to destroy the man that I love? So she takes the opposite tack, and then she says, but that's terrible too. And she says, but my love. Again with the trembling strings. Beautiful phrases here. We've heard that music before. One of the things of the role of Aida has been controversial ever since the opera was first performed, is what kind of soprano do you actually need for this role? It is an extremely developed orchestra, as we said. It's powerful in places, but the musicality, this almost finding ways to depict yes, Eastern or Middle Eastern by using this chromatic, or like this. these phrases. You hear a almost melismatic approximation of what in Verdi's imagination is Egyptian. So the voice has to be able to sing very instrumentally. What do I mean by that? It has to be able to negotiate very tight intervals, and the intonation is at a premium. It became the tradition to use very, very large voices for this part, but they had to be voices that were extremely flexible. Otherwise, you could never sing the soft bits here. Let me give you an idea of what the singer has to do. She sings a prayer to the gods. Have pity on my suffering, O gods. And the tune. Again, with the trembling strings. Amazing color. Resolving. I have no hope for my sorrow. She builds on that. Just as quickly coming down to the most intimate pianissimo. Again, listen to that harmony. So I prefer a more lyric soprano, a soprano that has a greater flexibility, but a singer that also has the ability to ride over the orchestra and chorus when necessary. She finishes that aria and it is left hanging in the air. It's a really beautiful moment. And then we go to the scene of the consecration. And the consecration is a real sort of centerpiece, if you like. We hear harps. We hear a voice from off stage from the priestess. And here we really hear that Eastern, Middle Eastern. Again. All giving local color to this. There'll be prayers, and this will lead into a dance. There's many dance sequences in this opera. We start the first one here. Very famous with the three flutes, which leads then into the Temple of Vulcan, where they pray Radames, Memphis, in very, very, very dark and solemn tones, trombones and horns. That will accompany like this. So, yes, look after us, gods. Help us to be invincible. And this builds up to an incredible finale but that is truly disciplined. It's a prayer, but at once it's something military. And how Verdi achieves that is really quite spectacular. We hear the intoning of at the very end of this, the priestesses, they pray to Ta, their god. And there's a rumble. And the two soloists, immense of Ta. And then chorus, male chorus, and the soloists and the priestesses, immense of Ta. Thank you. Thank you very much for following me today for Act 1 of Verdi's Aida. You'll be hearing this Act 1 following now with the orchestra and chorus of the Accademia Nazionale di Santa Cecilia, Rome, and a starry cast, myself conducting. Thank you, IDAGIO, and thank you for watching and listening. A great pleasure to be with you. Thank you.